Hey warriors, look around you for a moment. Everything feels normal, doesn't it? The content you watch, the opinions you agree with, the decisions you make every day. It all feels like it belongs to you. But here's the reality most people never question. Control does not announce itself. It blends in so perfectly that you mistake it for your own thinking. You are not forced, you are influenced. You are not commanded, you are guided. And the most dangerous part is this. You don't even notice when it's happening. This is not a coincidence. This is design. Centuries ago, Niccolò Machiavelli revealed a truth that changed how power operates forever. He understood that real control is never loud. It is calculated, silent, and deeply psychological. He did not teach rulers how to show power. He showed them how to embed power into perception itself. That is why his ideas never disappeared. They evolved. Today, power does not rely on fear alone. It relies on shaping what you see, what you trust, and what you believe is real. And once that is controlled, your actions follow automatically. This is why some people dominate without effort, because they understand the system beneath the surface. And most people don't even realize they are part of it. In this video, you will discover 7 powerful Machiavellian principles that still control the modern world. These are not outdated philosophies. These are living strategies that influence behavior, decisions, and outcomes every single day. Once you understand them, your awareness changes. And when your awareness changes, control starts to break. Let's begin. 1. Control through perception. The first and most powerful principle of control is not force. It is perception. Most people believe reality is something objective. They think what they see, hear, and experience is the truth. But in reality, perception is often constructed. Centuries ago, Niccolò Machiavelli understood a simple but dangerous truth. People do not react to reality. They react to their interpretation of reality, and whoever controls that interpretation controls the outcome. Think about it carefully. 2 people can experience the same situation. One sees opportunity, the other sees threat. The situation did not change, only the perception did. This is exactly where power operates. In modern society, perception is constantly being shaped, not randomly, but strategically. Information is filtered, narratives are framed, certain details are highlighted while others are ignored. Over time, this creates a version of reality that feels natural, but is actually designed. And once you accept that version of reality, your decisions start aligning with it automatically. You don't question it, you don't resist it, you simply follow it, believing it was your choice all along. This is why influence today feels invisible, because it does not attack you directly. It surrounds you slowly. It shows you what to admire. It shows you what to fear. It shows you what to desire, and without realizing it, you begin to adopt those same patterns. This principle is not limited to media or large systems. It exists in everyday interactions. In relationships, a person who controls perception can completely shift how they are seen. They can appear confident even when they are uncertain. They can appear valuable even when they offer little. Because people rarely question what is consistently presented to them. They accept what feels familiar. That is why consistency in perception is more powerful than truth itself. Machiavelli understood this deeply. He knew that being perceived as powerful is often more effective than actually being powerful, because perception spreads faster than reality ever can, and once people believe in that perception, they start reinforcing it themselves. This creates a loop. You see something, you believe it, you act on it, and your actions strengthen the illusion even more. That is how control becomes self-sustaining. The most dangerous part is this: you can be inside this loop without ever realizing it exists. Because nothing feels forced, nothing feels unnatural, it all feels like your own thinking. But the moment you step back and question what you are seeing, you begin to notice patterns. You begin to see what is being emphasized. You begin to see what is being hidden. And slowly, the illusion starts to break. This is where awareness begins. And once you become aware of how perception is shaped, you stop reacting blindly. You start observing. You start analyzing. And most importantly, you stop confusing what you are shown with what is actually real. This is the first layer of control, and until you see it clearly, you remain part of it. 2. Control through fear. Fear is one of the oldest tools of control, but the way it works today is far more advanced, because modern fear is not always loud. It does not always look like danger. Most of the time, it feels like hesitation. It feels like overthinking. It feels like, what if something goes wrong? And that is where control begins. Centuries ago, Niccolò Machiavelli made a brutal observation. People are far more consistent under fear than they are under love. Because love is emotional. It changes, it fades, but fear stays. Fear creates boundaries inside your mind. It tells you where to stop. It tells you what not to say. It tells you how far you are allowed to go. And once those boundaries are accepted, control no longer needs to be enforced. You start controlling yourself. Think about it. How many times did you stay silent? Not because you had nothing to say, but because you were afraid of the reaction. How many times did you avoid taking action? Not because you couldn't, but because you imagined the worst outcome. That is not weakness. That is conditioning. Fear does not need to be real to be effective. It only needs to feel real in your mind. And once it feels real, your behavior adjusts automatically. This is how modern systems operate. They don't always threaten you directly. They create an environment where consequences are implied. You see what happens to others. You observe reactions. You notice patterns. And without being told, you learn what is safe and what is dangerous. This creates a silent agreement. You stay within limits. You follow expectations. You avoid risk. Not because someone is forcing you, but because fear has already shaped your decisions. This is the highest level of control, when no one needs to control you anymore because you are doing it to yourself. Machiavelli understood this clearly. He knew that fear does not need to be constant. It only needs to exist in the background, just enough to remind you what happens if you step out of line. And once that idea is planted, control becomes effortless. The most dangerous part is this. You start believing that your limits are natural. You think, this is just who I am. But in reality, those limits were installed slowly, repeatedly, silently. And the longer you live inside those limits, the harder it becomes to question them. That is how fear locks people in place, not with chains, but with thoughts. And until you recognize which fears are real and which ones were placed there, you will continue to live inside boundaries you never consciously chose. 3. Control through desire. Desire feels personal. It feels like something that comes from within you. Your goals, your ambitions, your attractions. It all feels real. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Most desires are not created by you. They are implanted into you. And once they take root, you start chasing them as if they were your own. This is one of the most refined forms of control, because when your desires are controlled, your direction in life is controlled. Centuries ago, Niccolò Machiavelli understood something most people overlook. People don't need to be forced when they're already motivated. If you can shape what they want, you don't need to tell them what to do. They will do it themselves. Think about it carefully. Why do certain lifestyles feel more attractive than others? Why do certain standards suddenly become ideal? Why do people chase things they once didn't even care about? This is not random. This is exposure. You see something repeatedly. You associate it with success, status, or happiness. And over time, it becomes desirable. Not because it truly is, but because it has been positioned that way. This is how modern influence works. It does not give you orders. It gives you images. It shows you what a perfect life looks like. It shows you what a high-value person should have. It shows you what makes someone worthy. And slowly, you start adjusting your desires to match that image. You begin to chase things without ever asking why you want them in the first place. That is the trap. Because once desire is external, you are no longer in control of your direction. You are reacting to what is being presented to you, and the system does not need to push you. You push yourself, harder, faster, further, believing that you are moving forward, when in reality you are following a path that was already designed. Machiavelli understood the power of this. He knew that controlling actions is temporary, but controlling desire is permanent, because desire creates obsession, and obsession removes resistance. When you want something badly enough, you stop questioning the source of that desire. You justify it, you defend it, you protect it, even if it is not truly yours. The most dangerous part is this. You can spend years chasing a version of success, only to realize it was never aligned with who you are, but by then, time is already gone, energy is already spent, and the system has already done its job. That is why awareness is critical. You have to question what you want. You have to ask where that desire came from. Because the moment you stop blindly chasing, you start choosing. And when you start choosing, control begins to shift back to you. 4. Control through silence. Most people believe control comes from information, from what they hear, from what they are told, from what is clearly explained. But real control often works in the opposite way. It comes from what is withheld, what is not said, what is not shown, what is never brought into your awareness. And because it is missing, you never question it. Centuries ago, Niccolò Machiavelli understood a subtle but powerful truth. Silence is not absence. Silence is strategy. Because when something is never mentioned, it slowly disappears from your thinking. You don't reject it. You don't analyze it. You simply never consider it. That is how limitation is created, not by force, but by omission. Think about it carefully. If you are only shown certain options, you believe those are the only options that exist. If certain perspectives are never introduced, you assume they are not important. And if certain truths are consistently ignored, they start to feel irrelevant. This is how your thinking becomes structured, not by what you know, but by what you never had the chance to know. This is the silent form of control, because it does not confront you, it quietly shapes your boundaries. You move within a limited space, believing it is the full picture, and because nothing feels missing, you don't search for more. That is the illusion. In modern environments, this principle is everywhere. Information is not always false. It is simply incomplete. You are given enough to understand, but not enough to question deeply. This creates a controlled perspective. You feel informed. You feel aware. But your awareness has edges. And those edges were designed. Machiavelli understood this perfectly. He knew that controlling the narrative does not require lying. It only requires selecting what is visible. Because once you control visibility, you control interpretation. And once interpretation is controlled, behavior follows. The most dangerous part is this. Silence feels natural. You don't notice what is missing. You only notice what is present. And because of that, the control remains invisible. You operate within limits, without ever seeing the boundaries. That is why breaking this requires effort. You have to actively question what is not being said. You have to look beyond what is presented. Because awareness is not just about collecting information. It is about recognizing gaps. And the moment you start seeing those gaps, you begin to step outside the structure that was quietly shaping you. That is when control starts to weaken. Not because the system changed, but because you finally saw what it was hiding. 5. Control through validation. Every human wants to feel accepted, to feel seen, to feel valued, to feel like they matter. This need is natural, but when this need becomes strong, it becomes a point of control, because the moment you depend on validation, you start adjusting yourself to receive it. Centuries ago, Niccolò Machiavelli understood a critical weakness in human nature. People will often trade authenticity for approval, not consciously, but gradually. You say what is acceptable, you avoid what is controversial, you behave in ways that get positive reactions. And over time, you stop being yourself. You become what is rewarded. This is how control becomes internal. No one forces you to change. You change to stay accepted. Think about it. Why do people hesitate to express real opinions? Why do they follow trends they don't even believe in? Why do they seek constant reassurance before making decisions? It is not because they lack intelligence. It is because they fear losing validation. And once that fear exists, control becomes effortless, because now your behavior is no longer based on truth. It is based on reaction. You observe what gets approval, you repeat it. You observe what gets rejected, you avoid it. This creates a pattern. You stop exploring, you stop questioning, you start performing, and the more you perform, the more you depend on external feedback. This is the trap, because the more validation you seek, the less control you actually have. Machiavelli understood this deeply. He knew that people can be guided without force if their need for approval is strong enough, because approval becomes a reward, and humans naturally move toward reward. The most dangerous part is this. You start believing that approval equals value, but in reality, approval is often just alignment with what others expect. And when your identity depends on that, you become predictable, and what is predictable is easy to control. That is why awareness is critical. You have to notice when you are adjusting yourself, just to be accepted, because the moment you stop seeking constant validation, you remove one of the strongest levers of control, and when that happens, your actions start becoming your own again. 6. Control through division. Unity creates strength. Clarity creates direction. Shared understanding creates power, but division breaks all of that. It creates confusion, it creates conflict, it creates distraction, and while people are divided, they are easier to control. Centuries ago, Niccolò Machiavelli recognized a powerful strategy. If people are busy fighting each other, they stop questioning who is actually in control. This is not always obvious. Division does not always look like conflict. Sometimes it looks like disagreement. Sometimes it looks like opposing opinions. Sometimes it looks like constant comparison. But the result is always the same. Attention is scattered. Instead of focusing on the system, people focus on each other. They argue, they defend, they attack. And while all of this is happening, control remains untouched. Think about it. When people are divided, they cannot unite. When they cannot unite, they cannot challenge anything effectively. This creates a perfect environment for control, because now there is no resistance, only noise, and noise is easy to manage. In modern society, this principle is everywhere. People are constantly categorized. separated by beliefs, opinions, and identities. Each group feels right, each group feels justified, but the more they separate, the weaker they become collectively. This is the illusion. You feel like you are standing for something, but in reality, you are being pulled into a structure that keeps you distracted. Machiavelli understood this clearly. He knew that power is safest when people are not aligned, because alignment creates awareness, and awareness creates challenge. The most dangerous part is this: division feels natural. It feels like personal choice. It feels like individuality. But when it is constantly reinforced, it becomes a tool that keeps people apart. And when people are apart, they are easier to influence, easier to guide, and easier to control. That is why awareness matters. You have to recognize when division is being amplified, because the moment you step back and see the bigger structure, you stop reacting to conflict and start understanding its purpose. 7. Control through identity. The final and deepest level of control is identity, because once identity is shaped, everything else follows. Your decisions, your behavior, your beliefs, it all aligns with who you think you are, and that is where control becomes permanent. Centuries ago, Niccolò Machiavelli understood that influencing actions is temporary, but influencing identity changes a person at their core, because identity does not question itself. It defends itself. Think about it. If you believe you are a certain type of person, you will act accordingly. You will make choices that confirm that identity. You will reject anything that challenges it, even if that identity was never truly yours. This is how deep control operates. It does not tell you what to do. It tells you who you are. And once you accept that, your actions become predictable. You stay within that identity. You protect it. You repeat it. This creates a loop. You act based on identity. Your actions reinforce that identity, and the cycle continues. The most dangerous part is this: you believe it is your true self, but in reality, it may have been shaped over time, through environment, through influence, through repeated exposure, and because it feels familiar, you never question it. Machiavelli understood this perfectly. He knew that once a person sees themselves in a certain way, they become easier to guide, because now control does not need to come from outside. It comes from within. You limit yourself. You define your boundaries. You decide what is possible and what is not, all based on an identity that may not even be real. That is the final layer of control. Not controlling your actions, not controlling your thoughts, but controlling the very foundation from which those thoughts and actions are created. And breaking this is not easy, because it requires questioning who you believe you are. It requires stepping outside familiar patterns. But the moment you do that, you create space. Space to redefine, space to choose, space to take control back. And when that happens, you are no longer playing within the system. You are seeing it from above. Now you've seen the patterns, not just on the surface, but beneath it. So the real question is not what is happening. The real question is, what are you going to do about it? Because awareness alone is not enough. If you see the system, but continue to behave the same way, nothing changes. You remain inside it. So here's where control starts shifting back to you. First, start questioning your perception. Don't accept everything at face value. Ask yourself, why am I seeing this? What is being emphasized? What is being hidden? Because the moment you question perception, you weaken its influence. Second, Separate real fear from installed fear. Not every hesitation is truth. Not every doubt is valid. Some fears were placed there to keep you within limits. Identify them. Challenge them. Because when fear loses its grip, your actions become sharper. Third, audit your desires. Ask yourself, do I truly want this? Or was I taught to want this? Because if your desires are not yours, your direction isn't either. And the moment you take back your desires, you take back your path. Fourth, pay attention to what is missing. Don't just focus on what is being said. Focus on what is not being said, because silence is not empty. It is intentional, and once you start seeing gaps, you start seeing truth. Fifth, detach from constant validation. Stop performing for approval. Stop adjusting for acceptance. Because the more you depend on validation, the easier you are to control, and the moment you become self-directed, you become unpredictable. Sixth, step back from unnecessary division. Not every conflict deserves your energy. Not every argument deserves your attention, because distraction is a tool, and when you stop reacting to noise, you start seeing structure. Finally, redefine your identity. Don't blindly accept who you think you are. Question it, because identity is the deepest layer of control, and when you rebuild it consciously, you stop living on autopilot. Most people will watch this, understand it, and then go back to living the same way. Not because they can't change, but because they won't apply it. But you are different now, because once you see the system, you cannot unsee it. And once you understand how control works, you stop being an easy target for it. This is not about becoming paranoid. This is about becoming aware, because awareness is where power begins. And the moment you start thinking for yourself, acting with intention, and questioning what others accept blindly, you step into a different level of control. Not control over others, but control over yourself. If this shifted your perspective, make sure you subscribe to Powerful Stoic Way and stay connected. Because here, we don't just talk about reality, we expose it. And once you start seeing things clearly, there is no going back.